The phrase having it all used to sound like freedom. But now, for many women, it feels like pressure to do everything perfectly all at once. Raise the kids, run the meetings, look good while doing it, and never drop the ball. In this episode, I'm joined by the amazing Dr. Giselle Goodwin, author of Can Women Really Have It All?, to unpack how this idea shifted from empowerment to exhaustion. We talk about what having it all really means in 2025, why women are statistically less happy than they were 50 years ago, and how we can start letting go of the myths that keep us stuck. We also explore what needs to change, not just in our lifestyle and our mindset, but in the systems around us, so that women can build full, joyful lives without burning out trying to prove themselves. This is for anyone who's ever looked at the life they were supposed to want and thought, why does this feel so hard? So I don't quite know how I managed to wangle this one, but somehow today I'm joined by Dr. Giselle Goodwin, who is one of the most prominent and most accomplished women talking about this idea of women, well-being and work at the moment. And I'm so excited to have you here. Hi, Giselle.
Hello. Hi, Danny. It's such a pleasure to be here talking to you.
I'm going to dive straight into it with the first question that I want to ask everybody who comes on the podcast, which is, tell me about that moment, that first time when you asked yourself, where the hell did I go?
The moment I remember as being this kind of really, oh, what the hell moment was the morning I went back to work after my first baby was born. So she was only 11 weeks old. She was this little dot. And it was this really cold, blustery January morning. I live in the north of England. It was raining buckets. It was one of those days where I should have just, having been up breastfeeding all night, I should have rolled back under the duvet and been back in bed. At the time, my husband and I had a recruitment business that we'd started 3 years previous. It was going well. And I ran the sales and operations team. He did strategy finance. And we worked brilliantly together at work, but we knew that I had to get back to the office because in terms of managing the sales team, I needed to get things moving. So she was only 11 weeks old. And that morning, oh my God, I was just like, it was almost like comical, this bit about like I was leaking everywhere. So rather than back under the duvet, I was there, I put this I was trying to pretend I was in control. I put this bright red power dress on. I put heels on, Danny. I can't even understand. Put heels on. Yeah. I had my briefcase. I had my breast pump. And my brain was on frazzle. And I was leaking everywhere. So my brain was leaking. My eyes were leaking. My boobs were leaking. None of it was adding up. And I was just really the swan on the outside, but the paddling under the water, really trying to keep it together. And I did love my job. I was proud of my business. I was proud of what we'd done. I wanted it all to work. So there was financial stuff, but there was also, I enjoyed work as well. So there was this bit about, this is fine. I can do this. I'm going to step back into this. But in terms of how I felt, I felt very lost and very at sea and just this massive imposter syndrome feeling. And so I did. I went back into the office and I'd be taking phone calls and I'd be taking phone calls in the cupboard under the stairs just to get a bit of peace and quiet, or locked in the shower cubicle with the door closed, just to be a bit more, I don't know. So my head could start to think straight. So that was the moment, that first morning of going back where I felt lost. And then it kind of, it continued. I spent quite a lot of juggling time during my 30s when my kids were little. And I think the thing that really got me was this was meant to be something I was able to do. So I very much looked at it how have I got this wrong? How is it that the people around me, and you do that thing, you look and you go, well, they seem to be doing okay. They're coping. It's me over here that's the weakling that hasn't got it together, can't seem to manage it, can't seem to pull it off. And I think there was a few things I was really naive about. I think one of the things at the beginning I was naive about was, because my husband and I had this really good working relationship at work, where he had his thing, I had my thing. We both worked really well together in a work situation. I just presumed that that would translate quite easily to our domestic life. And that we both thought, I think we went into it like, we're going to be these parents like that. The baby comes along with us, she'll fit into our lives. It'll be fine. We just crack on. We're like, cool. We're no fuss. The baby had other ideas, like sleeping was one of them. And I think society had other ideas as well. And I hadn't realized this weight of expectation that I felt from others, so society, but I also felt from my husband. And somehow I had internally absorbed this as well. So this bit about balancing work and family and how that was all going to unravel and how I was going to make that work, I hadn't really come to terms with the idea that that was on me primarily as the mother. I grown up, so I'm Gen X. I grew up in the 80s with that like culture of, Thatcher, Reagan, girls can do anything, boys can do, put your big girl knickers on, get in the world of work. You can make it happen. Don't rely on a man to financially provide for you. You can do that for yourself. And I was kind of like, yeah, feminism, it's now a done deal. Women can do anything. This should be perfectly reasonable. And it wasn't. So A, the expectation, B, just the flipping part of it was leaking through my breast pads in a meeting and I couldn't take my blazer off. There's a lot of physical stuff that we deal with. So yeah, the physicality got me. The mental stuff got me too.
There's just so much of what you've said, I think, which you can kind of summarize into two things. One is pretending. So we're just like kind of waking up into motherhood and then putting on this mask of trying to pretend to the outside world that we are the person we always were, when internally we are, and often externally actually, we're completely different. We look different. We're, like you say, leaky boobs, leaky eyes, brain that is just not working. But we're trying to hide all of that. And that feels really sad when I hear you say that. I know that I've been definitely guilty of doing the same pretending act. And I've heard it from so many other women recently that they just don't want anyone to know how much is happening under the bonnet. So they're trying to pretend on the outside that everything is okay. So I definitely want to dive into that a bit more. And then there's something else, which is just around distraction. And there is, no matter how hard you try, I think as a parent, probably it's a universal feeling, but I think definitely as a mother in those early years, you are so preoccupied by the well-being of your children. Like I was just explaining that before we logged onto this call, I just happened to be thinking about my son who was a bit off this morning and decided to just check the nursery app to see if there was any information about how he was doing. And I could see that he'd taken a nap at a time that he wouldn't have done. If you haven't got children, that's such a non-event, right? Like, yeah, he slept at a time he wouldn't normally slept. But my mum brain goes straight into, oh my goodness, like maybe he's sick, maybe he needs his mum right now. I'm about to log on to this, first podcast recording. I'm nervous about that. But actually, my whole being, my mind is elsewhere now. And I think that distraction is so difficult to reconcile for modern working mums, and probably just, whether you're working or not is irrelevant, really. Your whole sense of self is so tied up in someone else or other people.
Yeah.
And that's like internalized, but also I think it's expected of you that that's the case. And so, of course, in all of that, in the trying to pretend I remember going back to work with my second and being in these meeting rooms that weren't really, everything was visible. The glass was not fully opaque or anything, and just pumping and just being like, I just really hope no one walks by right now because this is so awkward. Like my machine was making loads of noise and I was new and it's just like not ideal. And, you're used to yourself being someone that is not. And it's really hard for everything to catch up, I think.
Yeah. And that's the bit that I love. I just love that title of your podcast, the where did I go bit, right? Because I think it's such a universal feeling for mothers. Absolutely. For me, it was not only the juxtaposition of like these two identities, as you describe, am I mum, I'm distracted, am I worker, and those are very doing roles, aren't they? So they're productive, they're doing as a mother, they're doing as a worker. But then there's no space in the middle, or it feels like there's then no time left for the me bit in the middle. And I mean, I think that's the essence of it. It's the where did I go? What happened to me at the end of this? And it's a big deal. And we have some words for this now. We talk a lot about this word matrescence now, don't we? This whole scale, and we say it's like this parallel. It's almost like adolescence. It's a rewiring as you become a mother, the physicality of it, the emotion of it, the rewiring of your brain, the bodily changes, all that kind of stuff. And we have to talk about it, but we need to, I think, give ourselves some grace and some space to allow ourselves to just be with it as well. And I never gave myself that. I think that's where my book has come from. So I spent a lot of my 30s in this, like, I didn't get completely burned out, but I would say I was frazzled. I spent a lot of time feeling frazzled, feeling guilty. We know 85% of mothers feel guilt chronically, and feeling like overwhelmed and like I was letting somebody down at every point. So I spent a lot of time feeling like that and wondering, what I'd done wrong to feel like that. And, I only really got out of that phase after. So I ended up with two businesses. I had the recruitment company. I had an online pharmacy as well. Sold them in 2018. And I went and did something for me, which was I was doing some writing. And that's always been a way of me expressing myself, trying to figure out my own thoughts and feelings. And I met this woman at this writing conference, which is how this whole thing started. So she was a professor of women and work. That was what she did. And I thought she was amazing. She was 10 years older than me. She had some of these answers, like the tick of those questions in my brain, like, how does this add up? Why is it not adding up? And like, I always remember her saying this thing, which was, Giselle, it's not you. She said, you're taking personal responsibility for something that is greatly a societal issue. Number one, you're not alone with this. But number two, there are bigger societal issues at play here. And there's trends that are going on here that you're not accounting for. And I just felt, when she said that, it was just the relief of, oh my God, it's not just me. It's not just me. It's not me getting it all wrong. Yeah.
I just want to put my hands up in the air and be like, yes, like, thank you. Thank you. Like we're just sat here feeling like we're doing something wrong. And it's almost like, it's like laughable to me in a way that we have this expectation on women that they should become mothers, but then create an environment and a system and a society that makes no space for them to be so. It's just frustrating because you're internalizing that as like a personal failure, as are many other women. And then the moment someone says, hey, I'm really struggling, or what the hell is this? Like, I'm really like, I had this hilarious, just like everything kind of comes back to being a mum at the moment, how it is when you've got young kids. But I was at the circus with my with my son at the weekend, and there was the act where they're like spinning all the plates, and the skit is when will it fall off? And I was just looking at it being like, that is literally parenting today. You are just spinning.
There's my metaphor. There is it.
It's like
in visual.
I'm like so uncomfortable watching these plates because that is my life right now. And of course you're going to feel on the back foot if you're just trying to do too many things in too many places and trying to do them all perfectly. And I think you're so right, being able to say, I need to give myself some grace right now because this is not me. This is the system. And it's okay that I can't do it all, or it's okay that I'm only able to give, 50% to my work when I'm used to giving 1,000,000%. Like that has to be an okay sort of conversation that you have with yourself rather than one that feels punishing. So it's just wonderful, I think, that we are just starting to talk about this stuff a bit more openly.
And owning it and being realistic about it. I think one of the first conversations I ever had about this was a good while ago when my children were very little. So this friend of mine basically said to me, we're sat at our kitchen table. We were talking about a friend of hers who was a hospital doctor. And my friend basically said to me, the thing is, Giselle, I think it's ridiculous. I'd never tell my daughter to study medicine. Like, who'd want to tell their daughter to study medicine and become a doctor? Like, that's just ridiculous. Because, you know, women are just decided that, you know, we're so sick of this idea of having it all because all we're doing is doing it all.
Yeah.
And but it really posed me a problem, that conversation. She's not wrong. This doesn't work for me either. I get that. So we are stressed and we are sick of doing it all. But my two little girls were there when I was having this conversation, and I was looking at them and I was thinking, like, so what do I tell them? Yeah, honey, don't strive, marry rich, like, don't bother. It's all a crock. Like,
exactly.
Like, that was the nub of it for me was, well, what do I give up?
Yeah, exactly. It is definitely like a feminist problem, isn't it? Where you're saying, you know, in the 70s, we couldn't do so many things that right now would be crazy to think about not being able to do. So we've come huge strides in a generation or two. And now we're saying we don't actually want them. It's choice, right? It's choice about picking the bits that are good for you and your family and your children. If suddenly you need to do all the things and there's no question around that, that's very uncomfortable. I think that's a very uncomfortable reality for women to be in.
It's choice and it's support, isn't it, as well? So I think where the feminist movement has got us is more choice. And 100%, like, let's be super clear. We don't want to go back to, you know, 100 years ago, we didn't have the vote. 50 years ago, women couldn't have mortgages or credit cards in their own name. There was the marriage bar, you know, meaning, you know, in the UK, women in certain professions had to give up work when they got married. We aren't, you know, it's a very short period of evolutionary time where we've got to where we are. And my argument about this having it all stuff is we're just not there yet. We're not there yet. So what we've done, and the researchers talk about this idea that women have what they call a new sexual contract with society. So what we felt 100 years ago was that you should fulfill your reproductive destiny and become a mother. That's what you were meant to do. That was womanhood. Today, and the data backs this up, what society expects of women is not only to be the primary caregiver, but also to provide financially for our children. So there are two jobs there. What I sometimes hear people talk about, they approach this having it all business by saying either, well, women can have it all, but just not at the same time. Or the other thing that we say is, well, nobody can have it all. Life doesn't work like that. You have to choose what your all is and kind of go with that. And those are two prevailing perspectives on the issue. And I'm fully on board with both of them. I get both of those. I would say I take it a slight step further in my research. And my argument is that the having it all definition I grew up with was this idea that feminism had got us to a place where it was perfectly possible for both mothers and fathers to have a career and a family. And that was kind of equitable, but you could do that quite reasonably. And I argue that we're just not there yet. And that there are 4 reasons for why having it all looks different today for mothers versus fathers. So the first is this idea of tall poppy syndrome. They sometimes call it the ambition gap or the confidence gap. So the metaphor is this: if you imagine a field of poppies waving in the breeze, and one poppy grows taller than the others. Human compunction is to cut that poppy back down to size, right? Like them to be the same size as everybody else. And that's kind of reasonably human nature, is to say, you know, who do you think you are? And we know, especially in the workplace, that this tall poppy syndrome happens far more often to women than to men. So ambition is not a gender congruent thing for women to do. It is for men, but not so for women. So what we're finding is that when we see men strive at work, we think that's a good thing. When we see women strive at work, there is still that who does she think she is?
Yeah.
And as a consequence, women are still the doers. We are still at work doing that paddling, that people pleasing, that really trying to be our all to prove our seat at the table.
Yeah.
So we still have this push and pull around work and what that means to us. And that really, are we meant to be there? Are we meant to be doing this?
Yeah, I can definitely identify with some of that in some of the work that I do outside of this podcast. I do all kinds of research into the future of work. And one of the things that always strikes me is just how much of the task load that women take that is purely people pleasing. So they end up doing a lot more things like note taking or booking meetings or administrative tasks that just tend to fall on women's plates in a way that they don't to men. And it's not a conscious thing. There's a sense from women that if they don't do those things, that they'll be criticized, or that they ladder up to being more promotable overall because you're seen as being helpful. And I'm just so shocked by that idea that we've sort of internalized.
And we have internalized it. I do it all the time. And it's an emotional load. In addition to the really crucial temperature checking we do with our families, there's an emotional load that primarily women carry. And it translates at work and at home in different ways. So this is one thing. The second thing is this idea of greedy jobs. And again, this comes back again a little bit to the how do we get a more equitable kind of society. So Claudia Goldin, who is, she won the Nobel Prize for her work on the gender pay gap in 2023. So she's an economist. And she says that one of the reasons for the significant reason for the gender pay gap is something she calls greedy jobs, which is those big movers and shakers of the world. So the parliamentarians, the finance guys, the tech bros, the people in media politics, the people at the upper ends of policy and law and society who are making the big decisions in terms of what affects all our lives. Those jobs, because they require greedy hours, lots of travel, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
In heterosexual relationships, they typically still go to men.
Yeah.
And so that leaves us, again, with this kind of slightly lopsided view of society, lopsided view of what possibly work and parenting is. And it just almost exacerbates the situation. That's number two. Number three is the domestic load gap. So we know that women, depending on the study you look at, are doing consistently between half an hour and an hour more per day total workload. Right. Now, that just measures, as I say, work inside and outside the home. It doesn't measure the emotional load, the mental load that we were just discussing. And so this hour a day adds up to 2.5 years of our lives. That's in the global north. In the global south, they talk about it being 4 years of a woman's life. So there's a significant amount of labor, and they even have this term about breadwinner moms, where they say even women who are primary breadwinners in their household will often come home and still do additional domestic emotional labor to compensate for this unwitting emasculation that they've done by being out in the workplace. So these gender kind of norms are still very pervasive. And then the final thing is this bit I call about the good motherhood penalty. And I think this very much speaks to what we were talking about earlier, that inherent internal pull of motherhood. And is it inherent? Is it societal expectation? I don't know. It's there, though. So the idea that being a good mother has got so much more weight and emphasis than being a good father. The bar is higher. So good mothers are in person, time-bound, emotionally nurturing, and the key word here is self-sacrificing. You are not a good mother if your children don't come first. I remember this incident when my children were very little and I used to take them swimming. So they were toddlers. We were all getting out of the pool and I was getting myself dressed. And you know what it's like after you've been taking the kids swimming? Like your hair's up here. Everybody's cold. Everybody's wet. Everybody's like slippery. You get them out of the pool and I was getting myself dressed. So I was shoving my wet legs into my jeans. The children were waiting. And there was another mum in the changing room. And she scooped up one of my little girls and wrapped her in a big towel and handed me this big bunch of like arms and legs and was like, oh, I couldn't bear to see her cold.
No.
And Danny, the shame. The shame, the shame, the shame of me getting myself dressed
Oh
before
my
getting the
gosh.
children dressed.
Like, I don't even understand how that in any moment in time felt to her like an appropriate action.
I genuinely, I think she thought she was being helpful. I
I
don't
know, but
think
you're
there was,
right.
it's like that, like jellyfish moment, like what, whiplash. I don't know what it was on her, but I know my
Yeah.
internal, like, when you can feel it rise from your flipping feet.
It, it, oh, it's so that fear of how you're being judged as a mum, it really does something in your brain, doesn't it? Like, I remember when my oldest one was really young. And side note, which I'm sure I'll talk about much more in other conversations, but I had extremely bad postpartum depression and anxiety, and it
Yes.
totally changed my sense of confidence and self-worth.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
just managed to pluck the courage up to kind of take my son out by myself, and had the confidence that I could kind of do that. And you know what it's like when you have little babies, they're taking their socks off all the time. It's hard to get them to keep hats on and all sorts. And he was only, I don't know, maybe 4 months or 5 months, something like that. And anyway, his sock had come off, and this older lady stopped me in the street. She was like, "Your son is freezing." And I was like, and now I was really like, oh my God, my son is freezing. And then I was like, no, wait, like, I know him. He's fine. Like, he's so happy right now. But I've not stopped thinking actually about that moment. Now, 4 or 5 years later, I still think
The
about how it felt.
judgment.
Yeah.
It feels the judgment. It just, oh, I so get that. It washes over you.
Yeah.
What we also know is that, we're doing a lot more what they call intensive mothering now than we ever did. So when we look at how much working mothers in particular are doing, so if you compare working moms in the 1970s and working mothers today are doing double the amount of primary child care giving than we were 50 years ago. Double. Those days of go out and play on your bike, come home in time for dinner, that is no more. It's an issue very much for mothers who are experiencing so much burnout. So much burnout.
I really feel we're in a crisis sort of generation. There's so much expectation in terms of what it takes to be a good parent, positive parenting styles, and how to really nurture your children in a way that empowers them to understand their emotions, to reframe situations that perhaps a generation ago you might have just told your child off for, but now it's a learnable moment. There's so much pressure to just constantly be a good parent, isn't there? Let's take sleep as an example. I remember asking someone she's one of 5 children who are all very, very close in age. I remember saying, like, how did your mum do it? She was at home on her own, and you were all just there. And she was like, she would put us in a pram, take us in the garden, and she would leave us there until she was ready for our nap to be done. And I was like,
That's what my grandma said. That's what they did. That was my grandma said. In fact, that's what my mum said. My mum was like, that's what we used to do with you. Yeah.
Now we're like, we've got apps, we've got forums, we've got Instagram, we've got everything telling us all the ways that we're messing up.
Yeah, and all the different ways to do it. And it's all very polarizing, and it just, it piles it on. So we know that, some of those stats are that working mothers today have 40% more stress than their counterparts without children.
Wow.
And they're 28% more likely to burn out than working fathers. So it's this that stress shows up when they've done this research in like biological markers in their body, cortisol markers.
Right.
And some of these other, so it's not only just the stress and pressure, but some of the other kind of, I guess, influences are how we're living nowadays as well, in terms of losing our village, living in a nuclear family. And there's a brilliant researcher called Sarah Blaffer Hardy. She's an anthropologist, and she talks a lot about this idea that we evolved in societies where children had a number of caregivers. So we evolved in societies, yes, where children were held a lot more, but where actually children were held by a variety of members of the community. So it would be aunts, it would be uncles, it would be older children, it would be whoever. And they developed, and that was enriching for them because they developed different relationships and learned different things from different caregivers. And the idea that parenting should be down to the sole responsibility 24/7 of one completely stressed out, harried, harassed, burnt out, living in the modern day, culture of more, mother is absolutely bonkers. Absolutely bonkers. So it's not a wonder. It's
Yeah.
not a wonder we're feeling as we are, lost. And what's left for me?
I think the moments where I feel most lost actually are in the rare, 30 minutes or whatever, where I've got no children, they're in bed, everything's tidy, you've sat down and you're like, what now? What do I like? What do I even want to watch? I should go out, but where? And it's just this total loss of who you were. I used to be interesting and do things and have hobbies, and now I can't reach for that person anymore because she's so buried beneath the constantness of being a mum.
Yes.
That it's I don't really know how to build that person or that a new version of that person back up. And I think maybe there is something about not needing to right now, because whether for better or worse, definitely worse in my opinion, we've lost our village. And that means you can't actually have many hobbies. And rather than do what I've done in recent years, which is be like, why don't I have any hobbies? Why am I only doing the bare minimum right now? Maybe it's about embracing the fact that it is hard. You're doing the work of a community. It takes time to find your way back to having the energy for more.
Yeah, absolutely, definitely. It's that grace and self-compassion and just ability to go, this is where I am now. Yeah. And that's okay. And that's okay. It's really okay. One of the big things that's come out of my research that I'm really very passionate about is what is it that we want? So I talk about happiness and working mothers and, the science of well-being and all that kind of stuff. But like really drilling down, is it happiness? Is it purpose? What is the big picture about? I look at that. And, in terms of what we know about well-being, it's more than, so some of it's about moments of joy, but a lot of it's about purpose as well. And purpose isn't always joyful. And the academics describe this balance that we need in terms of leading a good life, they call it, or a life full of well-being. It's this balance between purpose and pleasure. And I think the readjustment in the where did I go, the motherhood bit of it is trying to come back to who you are and what that looks like, and just giving yourself some space to do it. So one of the things that's really big for me that I talk about is this idea of a portfolio career and being quite intentional about that. So if I'm giving myself space and grace currently, that's great. That's absolutely fine. We are living, in terms of cultural and society, we are living longer lives than ever before. Gone are the days where we had one job for life and that was it. We are living lives where, and I'm saying this as well as a mother of teenagers, we don't know who we are and what we want. I feel like you definitely don't know it, certainly as a teenager, even in your late 40s, I am now, there's different aspects of ourselves that I think we pull into it over time. And I think parenting is a big element of that. And, but it can be one aspect in a big life. And the idea that we have to do it now and all do it at once and feel bad that we're not and it's actually maybe just that realization of having the space and the grace to reframe, this is where I am now, but it doesn't mean that I won't be doing this or I won't be doing that. I've got this quiz on my website, which is like a personal happiness manifesto thing, which just gives you like that little starter. I mean, write on the notes on your phone, but my big thing is about make it intentional. So rather than I'm failing because I'm not doing this, that, and the other, it's that intention of, well, this is what I'm doing now, but my bucket list for life looks like this. Like I've got so many things I want to do. And I can reinvent myself in my 50s and 60s when my children are grown. I can, or, a lot of the women I researched for my thesis were, they'd started their own businesses, interestingly, after becoming mothers. It was like it started this creative drive in them, and it started them thinking about things, looking at the world in a new way. And that's the like that's something inside of you, you know, giving yourself that opportunity to go, right, what is that? There are other creative parts of me. I might have lost them in the sleep fog deprivation, but they are there. I will get back to them. If I don't know what they are now, that's fine. I'll come to them. And motherhood can be a time that you can do that. And so maybe looking at it as an opportunity and just really reframing. And I think everybody should reframe this idea about portfolio career. I think all parents, definitely, women and men, everybody should think your career is like a jungle gym and not a ladder, not this permanent trajectory of up, 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 up. But I'm going to collect these different skills and these different pieces of me over time, and ideally enjoy them as the journey goes on.
I love that. I think it's so important, actually, because so I've talked a lot about the changes that I've made in my own life, going from being somebody who was highly entrepreneurial, very self-driven. Really, there was no distinction between me and work. It was, we were one, and
Identity.
It was just my identity. It was just totally who I was. And I think the moment I had that same idea as you of, I can still do all of this when I have a baby, and the baby will just slot right in, and I mean, what's the big deal?
Be fine.
He'll be so fine. And then my first came along, and, I realized really quickly that that was so far from where I was at. And I do acknowledge there are plenty of women who can make it work. And it's not like I'm saying, I don't want to do that whole, good motherhood tax thing of being like, oh, but you can't do it all because your children need so much of you. No, it's like, it's more, if you feel like you're bowing under the weight of that pressure, that it's actually okay to just hold your hands up and say, right now, I can't be the mother I want to be and the professional person I want to be at the same time. Like, those two things are fighting against one another. And for my own sanity, I need to push one lever up and pull one lever down. And I think that...
And that's okay. And give yourself permission. It doesn't have to mean that you're losing out.
I know in your research, you've also identified some of the gaps that women struggle to make up or don't make up over time in terms of like overall earnings over a lifetime or size of your pension or things like that. How would you reframe those ideas for women who are worried about losing out over a lifetime for some of the aspects that we know will be different between mums and dads?
So it's very tricky, that. So I kind of divide my thought process on this into stuff that is within society's control and stuff that's within our individual control. So I talk a lot about how we can reframe it and deal with this situation, this soup that we swim in as individuals. In terms of things like the pension gap and the pay gap and all those things, there are bigger societal issues at play. And the things that we talk about mothers needing in terms of closing some of those gaps, you're 100% right. When in the 10 years after a mother has her first child, she takes a 60% reduction in salary and never recovers that pay penalty. We still have around a 15% pay gap, a 20% investment gap, a 38% pension gap. Those things are still just fact. And we know that it's significant when women don't have money. We know that women living in are far more likely to live in poverty than men. We know that money is important to well-being to the extent that it buys you choice. So you don't need a lot of money to be happy, but you do need it. It buys you choice and autonomy. And that is very much fed into well-being. So in terms of money being important, it is significant. It is a thing. But some of the answers to it are societal issues. Yeah. So we need more flexible working, high quality childcare, and paid parental leave. Those are the things that the campaigners bang on and on and on about. And those three things need to be taken by both mother and father. Yeah. And we need really good, dads get, 2 weeks parental leave in the UK. I know they're campaigning for 6. It sets up gender roles for life. And my whole argument is women need choice, but we need support. And that supports those support systems around flexible working, paid parental leave, and high quality childcare at appropriate ages for children after both parents have had a really good paid parental leave is really, really important. And they are just societal issues that we need to do more campaigning for, because when we get more gender equality, we will see those financial things iron out. I think they're saying is it 134 years they're saying till we get to gender equality? I mean, for me, it's not quick enough. And the other thing that always I just think is fabulous about this research is that study after study after study tells us that those people who live in societies that have more equality, and when we say equality, we mean equality of opportunity, they have greater well-being. This is consistent. And it's not like this, a zero-sum game where, women up, men down. It's both men and women in more gender equal societies are happier. So it's a win-win for everybody. It's where we need to get to. And we are moving. We are definitely going in the right direction. Yeah. We are. But it's like that movement of the tide, that progress of feminism. It's like that 2 steps forward, a step back, 2 steps forward, a step back. We're not there yet. But it's definitely the direction we need to be headed in. And in the meantime, we need to have some compassion for ourselves in the space that we're currently in.
I think that's such a good way of sort of changing this narrative. What can I control? Within that space, I can be more compassionate to myself. I can resituate the ways that I'm talking about myself and to myself. And then the other stuff is out of my control. Like, you can't affect the things that are systemic, not alone anyway. And I just think that's a really helpful mental shift that anyone can make right now, which will almost instantly take that pressure off, because you suddenly stop having the weight of those big things on your shoulders, and you can focus on the smaller, more day-to-day shifts that you can make in your behaviors, in your belief systems, the choices you make, so that you can affect your happiness or your sense of well-being. Coincidentally, so I live in Denmark, which is a really good case study in all of the things that you've just mentioned as being really important in terms of a much more equitable situation for parents across all of the parameters. My husband and I shared 6 months. We had 6 months of parental leave each for our second child, and that's a new. I did a much longer. I was definitely the primary caregiver with our first, and then there was a legislative change that came into force by the time we'd had our second. And I can say anecdotally that there is something difficult or challenging about being taken out of that primary caregiver role. I found it really hard. I felt like I had to excuse why I was back at work when my son was 6 months. I was really sheepish about saying that we as a couple had chosen to split the parental leave 50-50. I felt there was a judgment on me as a person, where my husband conversely was like, everyone was like, wow, what an amazing dad. You're taking 6 months with your child. And I don't know if it was real or self-imposed, but I really felt people were a bit shocked that I was back. And so I think there are 2 aspects of that. There's the legislative changes that need to happen, but also just those conversations we have or expectations we have about the role.
Social cultural. Social cultural expectations. And, we're all lost, right? So our lives have changed so rapidly that in terms of gender roles, everybody is kind of all a bit mixed up as to how it should be and where we sit. And so, which is why conversations like the one you're having here, like, it's so important that we keep discussing it, isn't it? It's so important because there's legislative stuff, but unless society and culture changes with it, it doesn't change, does it?
Exactly. In the UK, for example, I know anecdotally, lots of men that I've spoken to are afraid of the reaction that people would have if they were to take longer parental leave. They're worried that it would just be criticised.
There is 100% lots of data on that men are penalised for asking for parental leave. And it's more frowned upon when a man asks for it than a woman.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
all that kind of stuff. Yeah, we're not quite there yet. But yet is the operative word.
Yet, yes. And I think one of the most amazing parts of these conversations I've started having and these thoughts that I've started thinking is just this hopeful optimism. All of this started from me having a really bad day, basically, and feeling extremely lost and really negative about my identity, and that identity could ever be anything other than this sort of sense of kind of foggy confusion. But I've spoken to so many women who are like, just shift that narrative. You're in a moment of really positive change. You're transforming. You're not lost. You're moving. And we are moving. This is what culture is, right? This constant evolution of the way that we think, the way that we behave, the things that are normal now were not normal 10 years ago. And it's just going to be that constant movement for those who want it to be, because I definitely believe that if you want to be a stay-at-home mother or a stay-at-home father or a working mother who's the primary breadwinner, then all of those things should just be okay. And I can sense that I feel more positive about just the overall picture after having started having these conversations.
Yeah, I feel like that. I feel hopeful. I feel hopeful that we have the right trajectory.
So I know we could talk about this for hours and hours, but I'd love to just wrap up with a quick fire round with some short answers to some of the key things that I hope people can take away from this episode, if nothing else. So let's start with, what's one thing that always helps you feel like you again whenever you're feeling lost?
I love a walk in nature. Just walking, getting outside, seeing a different perspective. I love a good book, and I love a chat. I love a chat. That was part of my research. I love listening to other people's stories, because I think for me, it helps me reframe, get a different perspective. And good chat all day. Good chat, walk in nature. That's my thing.
Ideally at the same time, that'd be great.
Yes, I do that too.
So what does enough look like for you today?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I love that phrase, I am enough. You know, that's the whole positive affirmation thing, isn't it? For me, it's about owning it and being okay with me, warts and all. It is what it is. I am what I am. So yeah, I'm enough.
Yeah. This whole idea of compassion and non-judgmental stories that you tell about yourself. Just, this is a side note, and I know it's supposed to be a quick fire round, but well, whatever. I saw this video on Instagram or something the other day where someone was saying, your children won't learn about themselves by how you talk to them. They'll learn about themselves by how you talk to yourself. And I just thought it was a real light bulb moment that was like modeling kind of compassionate, healthy behaviors towards yourself. Like, we do all of those things for our children usually. You know, I'm kind of beating myself up if I'm ever feel like I was a bit too critical. The fact that I'm even thinking that shows that I'm probably trying to build like some resilience and self-confidence in them. But yet to myself, I'll be like, oh, you did a really bad job there. Or that was just, you sounded so stupid when you said that. And, you know, so all internal. I'm obviously not saying these things out loud, but still that disconnect is quite, it was just an eye opener for me about being
massive.
Bit more.
I saw exactly that same quote and I think it was Martha Beck. I had that exact same light bulb moment of, yeah, it's so true that when we're kind to ourselves, I think Becky Kennedy talks about this a lot, Dr. Becky, this idea of us modeling this behavior to our children, which is when we treat ourselves with compassion, then they will treat themselves with compassion. And that negative self-talk, you know, that voice in your head, that's not the voice we want to be modeled. We don't want that voice in our children's head, do we? So if we are able to model those behaviors that say, yeah, I'm being compassionate to myself. I'm giving myself a break with this. It's the best gift you can give your children, not only for yourself, but for your children.
Great. Now, just the last thing I wanted to ask and close off with is, if you could go back and speak to the version of yourself that was in that red power dress, leaky boobs, foggy head, feeling like you needed to take a call in a shower cubicle, what's the thing you'd love to tell that person today?
I would love her to know that she needs to give herself more space and compassion, and that it's not me who was personally failing. It wasn't me being weak or not coping or making bad choices, that this is just the soup. This is just the water that women are swimming in today, and that it's not just you. You know, it's a bigger societal issue. So give yourself some grace with it.
I love that. There's just so much to be gained from feeling part of a bigger whole. I think when you're in this phase of life, actually, I think in all phases of womanhood, just so many things happen to us from the moment we're, you know, prepubescent till, I guess, the final chapters, where we can perhaps internalize this sense of we're doing something wrong, when actually we're transitioning into different versions of ourselves, and we're doing that with lots of other women at the same time. And that connectedness is really powerful. And enormous. The community,
supporting
I think,
each other.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's been, I mean, honestly, I could just talk to you all day about these things. I really appreciate you sharing these insights and your personal experiences as well, because I know it's just so helpful to anyone who's listening. Okay, and just to wrap up, I'm sure people will have lots of things they'd love to know more about, from your work, from your book, to all of the different things that you've been working on over the last 10 or so years. So where can people find out more about you?
So, please do have a look at my book. I'm on Audible. I'm also in Waterstones in the UK, on Amazon, worldwide. The book's called Can Women Really Have It All? You can find me also on LinkedIn, Dr. Giselle Goodwin, or Facebook, and I'm on Instagram at Giselle Goodwin Writes. I do, if you go to my website as well, I have a free kind of download that you can do. You can sign up to my newsletter there, and it's a personalized happiness manifesto. It just gives you kind of a starter for 10 to think about your own, where you're going, and you know what's happening in your own life, and making your own kind of blueprint.
Great. That sounds like a really helpful resource, actually. I think this idea of sort of empowering people to take those next steps themselves, and feeling like we said, affecting the things that you can affect and forgetting about the rest. That just feels like a really nice next step.
Yeah, so that's GiselleGoodwin.com. So my website is there, and then Instagram or LinkedIn.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Giselle.
Thanks, Danny. Thank you.